Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger. Welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairman of the Schiller Institute. It's June 30th, 2021. We just had an extraordinary event over the weekend, a two-day Schiller Institute online conference, which was extremely timely given the confluence of events in the world, also given the arc of the last 50 years of history and the role of Lyndon LaRouche in shaping a perception, an idea that's not a narrative, but a truthful idea of what was coming and what's happened and how to deal with it. So Helga, maybe we want to start with the strategic panel, the first panel, given the events of the last week with the HMS Defender crossing into Russian territorial waters in Crimea. This certainly seems like a deliberate provocation following the Putin-Biden summit, doesn't it?
Yes, it is. Has all the signs that somebody wants to immediately, when there was a baby step in the direction of a, dialogue between the United States and Russia, Biden, Putin, somebody obviously thought, that it would be necessary to immediately, destabilize this by making this provocation, which was answered by Russia very firmly. They they put a couple of bombs in the pathway of this British ship and put out statements saying that the next time the bombs will not be put on the pathway but on the target itself. So, I mean, that shows you somehow how advanced the situation is. And I I just learned that President Putin today apparently said that there was an American ship very much nearby this HMS Defender British ship, and that it was a joint provocation, which obviously puts into question, can Biden rein in whoever did that, which is threatening to ruin what he tried to accomplish with Putin in Geneva. So, our conference came, at a very, very important time because the first panel, as you said, dealt with the strategic situation. We had very important speakers from Russia, from India. We didn't have a Chinese speaker because of some technical problems, but that will be remedied soon. And some, also from the Russian side, it was Mr. Kotonov from the Russian International Affairs Council, obviously a very high-ranking official of Russia. Then from the United States, it was more the opposition, namely Ray McGovern, who is known to many of our viewers. And we talked a lot about, I made a presentation where I went into the lies which are behind this myth that NATO never promised not to expand to the Russian border, which is being repeated by many commentators and journalists and whatnot. But as the US National Archive, which was, they published documents in 2017, 30 documents, hand notes, written memorandums from people who participated in the discussions 30 years ago, clearly show that it was promised by Baker, by top officials from the United States to Gorbachev. Kohl was involved, Genscher was involved. So it is really important to correct this narrative because nowadays, if you listen to commentators of the mass media, you would think that it's all to be blamed on Russia, while in reality, it was NATO which expanded to the borders of Russia. It was NATO who immediately started color revolutions, regime change. And so we had to set this record straight and also go into the long history of the failure of these policies, of the endless wars, recent, not so recent, but the from the Vietnam War to the Pentagon Papers, the heroic role of Mike Ravel, whose loss we are mourning right now, because he was one of the real heroes of the United States. You know, I mean, he, just to tell people, Mike Gravel was the senator from Alaska who read the Pentagon Papers into the congressional record, and he just passed away 2 days ago. And he was, you know, an outspoken patriot. For example, he said, you know, at one point, if you kill one person, it is a murder, but if you kill millions, it's called foreign policy. So that's the kind of outspoken person he was. So then naturally, recently the Afghanistan war, which just concluded, an unmitigated disaster. Nothing was accomplished, many lives lost. So, you know, I think it's really important that people are aware that we are presently in a dynamic. You know, what the global NATO 2030 plans are is to involve all countries all over the globe into a war machine designed to encircle Russia and China, which, if not stopped, can only lead to a catastrophe. So I think this was a very timely discussion, and I would really urge you, our viewers, to take the time to watch this panel because it gives you a very, very good idea where the world stands strategically.
It's posted at the schillerinstitute.com, the conference from this last weekend, and all four panels are there. Now, Helga, just to go back to this question of the talk from NATO and others of Russian aggressiveness, here you have the events with the in Crimea, the HMS Defender, but you've also just seen the Europe Defender 21, and now we have Operation Sea Breeze, which is a very large NATO maneuver in the Black Sea. It's just kind of ironic that they're talking about Russian aggression when we actually see this kind of military force being put right on the borders of Russia.
Yes, there is actually an article in a publication in Great Britain associated with the notorious Henry Jackson Society, which says that, you know, British policy in the coming period will be to make sure that the Black Sea is a geostrategic priority. Now, I mean, that's really a provocation, and it's part of this whole encirclement policy. You know, the Sea Breeze maneuver is 32 countries. I don't want to name now all of them, but noteworthy, it includes South Korea, Japan, Australia, and a couple of other countries very far away. What are they part of NATO? Obviously not. So this is a sign, you know, what they want to do. They want to include the Indo-Pacific into the global NATO, turn a lot of partners into members, because the argument is that only if countries are members, the Article 5 of NATO applies, which, you know, if one is attacked, all will come to the defense. This is a prescription for World War III. And, you know, I think that the whole anti-Russia, anti-China campaigns, people must wake up. Don't take everything for face value, what you are being told. This is, you know, what they call othering. Othering, according to the dictionary, means that you define a group of people to be so completely other than your own group that it is intended to desensitize people. You know, if something happens to these others, it doesn't, you know, it doesn't meet the same empathy as if it's part of your own group. This is part of war propaganda. And I think this, you know, this must be broken, because you cannot have, in the time of nuclear age, such a policy which, you know, I mean, the idea of regime change against Xi Jinping and Putin is a prescription for disaster, because it will be met with reactions, you know, which can only, you know, lead to a superpower conflict. And I would really call on people to start to think about that, and not just, you know, World War I was a sleepwalking into it. We are now, you know, anybody who would be awakened and have their attention to it, you don't need to sleepwalk because it's all over. But just because people become so overloaded with distractions, soccer games and whatnot, they don't pay attention to what is threatening the very existence of civilization. But that is what we are talking about.
I think it's also very significant that 2 days ago you had the Xi Putin reaffirmation of the 20-year friendship treaty between the two countries. Now, moving on in the second panel, which took up the whole question of climate change and the necessity for a massive development of real energy flux density for the world, we have on the other side Christine Lagarde from the EU essentially saying that no, people really don't want that. They want climate control, climate rules. Uh, Again, the EU is out of touch with the needs of the world.
Well, I'm afraid some of these officials just lie, because it's not possible that Madame Lagarde doesn't know that the Swiss just voted 3 environmental resolutions down because they recognize that it would ruin the Swiss economy, increase the cost of living. So they voted it down, and that is the general sentiment. I mean, there's a growing awareness that this climate policy, it's completely ludicrous. Our panel, we had, I don't know, 10 or 11 top scientists from all over the world who discussed that there are many models, climate models, which completely contradict the official story of the Green Deal and the Great Reset. So people, who really want to know the science behind this whole question should read this, watch our panel. This is a condensation of expert opinion, which is very hard to find anywhere else. But it's also clear that way before 2050, when there's supposed to be CO2 neutrality, this is not functioning now. You have blackouts. You had blackouts in Milan for 5 days in a row, up to 10 hours a day. There were blackouts in 6 US states for extended periods of time. And the Italian climate scientists have a online dialogue where they just had the third session, in which one Professor Petrocchio just pointed out to the fact that if you want to have climate neutrality by 2050, you would have to construct 6,001 megawatt wind turbines every single day from now on until 2050, which obviously will never happen. Or you would have to build thousands of 20 megawatt nuclear reactors every second day. This will also not happen. So this is a completely unrealistic perspective, and it's just a scam designed to give the speculators a heyday. And but it's really an assault on civilization. Just look at the deal which was just concluded between Norway and Gabon, the African nation of Gabon. They obviously are, in a very difficult financial situation because of the pandemic and the famine. So they concluded a treaty whereby they sign, an agreement that they will not develop their rainforest, or this is 90% of the territory of Gabon, that they will not export lumber, nor export resources from that area, nor do anything with it. And for that, they will get 150 million over 10 years. I mean, that's peanuts. That's proverbial peanuts. And it means there is no development in Gabon worth talking about if that's the only thing which is on the agenda. And that is the plan of Mark Carney for all of Africa. So it is a blatant attempt to reintroduce colonialism and to curb development, and it just is not going to work at all.
And it confirms what we've been saying about the Green New Deal, that a major aspect of it is to take these countries and prevent them from developing, which means their people are going to die in increasingly large numbers. Now, the third panel was on the coming hyperinflation, Weimar hyperinflation, that in fact we're moving into a moment where this is occurring now. And with all the nonsense coming out from people like Jerome Powell at the Federal Reserve and others that it's temporary, that it's not a serious problem, what we're actually seeing is tremendous volatility in markets and great fear among the average person. They're going to lose everything. Just say something about this panel, because I thought it was very important to get across this idea of why pumping liquidity into a financial system is not a solution when you need production.
Yeah, I mean, anybody who wants to have a competent discussion of, why this visible inflation is not going to be temporary should really watch this panel. This, by the way, has in the meantime also been raised by Robert Rubin and and Larry Summers, of all people, who basically say this inflation is here to stay. So even among the mainstream circles, there is an awareness that inflation is on the rise, and energy, food, all of these things is touching on the living standard of the average population. So the solution, which was also discussed, namely to have a global Glass-Steagall banking separation, is extremely important. So I think that that is a very important panel as well.
And on this question of a global Glass-Steagall, not every country has the universal banking system. It looks to me as though China has moved back from that direction, haven't they?
Yeah, they have, in any case, never fully made the renminbi convertible. It was always restricted, and they have sort of, measures whereby they recently even made a rule, a law that forbids Chinese investors to invest in international speculative activities. So also India is not completely convertible. So some of these countries are a little bit more protected, but obviously, I mean, when you have a meltdown of the system, either in a blowout, which could happen, or by flooding the market with liquidity and end up in hyperinflation, like it happened in Germany in 1923, it will affect the whole world economy. So therefore, we are really pushing this idea of a summit of, major countries, preferably the United States, Russia, China, and India at the core, to discuss a new Bretton Woods system, which would guarantee a credit system for real development. So this will be our continued focus, because there will be no solution to any partial problem if you don't eliminate the causes of why all of this, including the war policy, are happening.
Now, Helga, the fourth panel of the Schiller conference, and again, you can go to schillerinstitute.com and download or just watch all four panels. But the fourth panel was really remarkable because it demonstrated something that you've been insisting. Uh, well, many people denied that it's possible, but this concept of the coincidence of opposites, that you can bring people together and have a dialogue and achieve a higher conception that can resolve the problems that seem unresolvable. Say a little bit about it, because the discussion was quite something, including military officials, medical professionals, and so on.
Well, the committee of coincidence, I mean, first of all, people are struggling with that conception, and we get very funny comments, like saying you can put coincidence and opposites in one sentence because they contradict each other. But it's really, the whole conception comes from the German thinker of the 15th century, Nicholas of Cusa, and he was proud to say that he developed an approach of thinking, a method of thinking, to think the higher unity which goes beyond the contradictions on the lower level, and it's a way of problem solving. Now, this is a you know, you find it in many ways, and you know, I think you should look at the panel to get a sense of it, that it's really a, you know, in one sense it's not completely new, because this is as a principle already in Plato, the Parmenides idea, but Nicholas did contribute something absolutely revolutionary. And you know, it is a way of solving conflicts, of, you know, getting people together on a higher mission. And in this particular panel, you know, where the need to have a world health system, meaning a national health system in every single country to fight this pandemic and future pandemics, I mean, that's one concrete focus. So we had a beautiful discussion. There were two former Surgeon Generals of the United States involved, Dr. Elders, naturally, who has been one of the co-founders of the committee together with me. Then Dr. Zetscher, also former Surgeon General, and they were joined by two retired high-ranking military, a top official from the Russian mission from the United Nations in New York. And out of that developed a very beautiful dialogue of, you know, how if the United States and Russia, rather than having only strategic stability discussions, and which is very important, obviously, but to think of putting efforts together in a joint mission, like, you know, building this health system, rather than accusing the, which is happening right now, but this unspeakable German foreign minister Maas, he again at the G7 meeting in Italy, which just concluded, he attacked Russia and China, that they only have short-term geostrategic interest by supplying third world countries with vaccines. I mean, this is ridiculous. You know, the third world countries need this vaccine more urgently than anything else, because, you know, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, for example, he said that people should stop the restrictions of export, because, you know, all countries have to work together to solve this. So in this panel, there was a very productive dialogue involving the Americans, this Russian, and others, you know, on how to actually move this forward and get the kind of joint mission to address the problems which are existential for the developing sector. So I think this was very good. And then naturally we had a cultural section, very beautiful, joint recitation of the Declaration of Independence, which slightly altered is also the charter of the Schiller Institute, because when the Schiller Institute was founded, I wanted to make it a point that the Declaration of Independence, with slight changes, is applicable for every country on the planet. So young people from many third world countries were reading this together with Mr. Beltram, who's a professional actor, and the Rüttli Oath from Wilhelm Tell was recited. So that gives you the spirit of, you know, what is motivating people. And then naturally the, the final presentation was by Diane Sayre, discussing the principle of the coincidence of opposites in Beethoven's compositions of the Missa Solemnis. So people get a sense that this conception of the coincidence of opposites is a very rich concept, which has many surprising aspects to it.
And Helga, in wrapping up our discussion, I think it's important that you've made the point that these conferences should not be seen as individual moments, but as part of an ongoing process. I mean, in a certain sense, this goes back to the legacy of the work of your late husband, Lyndon LaRouche, and an arc that now is almost 50 years since the breakup of the Bretton Woods system in 1971. But we're going to continue these conferences, I'm assuming. And How do you see these as representing the kind of intervention that's needed? Because some people say, well, it's such a big issue, so many things involved. How can these few people coming together change things? But what is your conception about how this works?
Well, I mean, the world would not be in this condition it is right now if the analysis and policy proposals of Lyndon LaRouche would have been listened to. Instead, what you could call what Ray McGovern calls the Mickey Met, meaning the military industrial complex, plus the intelligence services, plus the think tanks, plus the media, that apparatus, which is, what is right now the war machine, they have gone after my husband and, try to kill his ideas. They try to kill him as well. And, to try to slender him in such a way that people would be, uh, deterred from actually looking at his work. But one of the beauties at this conference was that, this was the proof this is not functioning. More and more people in Latin America, in Asia, in the United States are looking at the ideas of Lynn. And his work was quoted and cited many, many times. So, that is very important because I'm convinced that, his foresight is absolutely relevant today. And if we want to get out of this problem of the world we are in, which is big, we need the wise words of Lyndon LaRouche, as Lopez Portillo had put it in 1998. So what we are doing, we will spin off many initiatives of this process, and we are building an anti-Malthusian coalition worldwide with the idea, that we have to get back to a political order in the interest of all, of, the common good. That was the title of the conference, a policy in the interest of the common good and not in the interest of a few. Because, we have to put politics in cohesion with the actual laws of the physical universe, or it will not function. And, it was discussed, among others, by Megan Beats or Megan Doport, I'm sorry, that, the evolution of the universe is exactly as, for example, Vernadsky, the great Russian scientist, described it. And Nicholas of Cusa was one of the stepping stones for this conception. And this is the way the universe is. So if you have a policy which assumes that you have an entropic universe, when the real laws of the universe are anti-entropic, then you get the kinds of breakdown phenomena what we are experiencing right now. So there is a much deeper reason behind our efforts, and that needs to be discussed, and people have to, get off their shallowness of the present day.
And a good start to that would be to go online at the schillerinstitute.com and watch the proceedings from the conference, all four panels, and then join the Schiller Institute to become part of this mobilization. So, Helga, anything else you want to add?
No, but, I think we really have to win this race against time. I think that the UN General Assembly in September is a point where we have to make all efforts that a world health system is put on the agenda. And so I would ask all of you to join in to make that happen.
Okay, well, thank you for joining us this week, and hopefully we'll see you again next week.
I hope so too.